Good afternoon. This is the Athens City Shade Tree Commission meeting for June 13th, 2018. The first item on our agenda is a presentation by Lisa Eliason, the Law Director, reviewing the Ohio Sunshine Laws. So you can introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Lisa Eliason. I'm the Law Director for the City of Athens, and I've been giving this presentation to the various boards and commissions. And back in January, I spoke to the City Council. They had a retreat, and I did this presentation at that time, and the mayor said, gosh, why don't you go out and give this presentation to some of the boards and commissions? So I've been kind of working my way through those boards and commissions, and I'm here this afternoon to speak with you. There are really three parts to this presentation, and the first part is the Sunshine Law. And the Sunshine Law consists of two parts. That's open meetings law and public records. And then also I have a little section on ethics law. So I handed you a packet, and I first of all let you know that the Sunshine Law and open meetings law is contained in the revised code. It's in 121.22. If I brought the book with me today, it's about this thick, and it's kind of a Bible for public forums like yours. And the law basically requires that any public group like this, and I'll explain that in a minute, that you meet in public and that you conduct all your business in public. So any of those public bodies, you're a public body, the meetings must be committed. They must be in public unless there's an exception. And one of the exceptions would be if you're having an executive session. This is interesting in that minutes of regular and special meetings of public bodies in your public body must be promptly recorded and open for public inspection. Now, your session is being recorded and sometimes broadcast. I'm not sure if it's being broadcast today, but there's no requirement in the law that it actually be broadcast. The important thing to remember is that the minutes must be promptly recorded and available for public inspection. That happens with each and every one of our boards and commissions here.
Does the law recognize the difference between the video of the meeting and the minutes of the meeting?
Right.
There is a distinction then?
There is a distinction, okay. Yes. So a public body, what is a public body? And that comes from the Ohio Revised Code, and it means any board, commission, committee, or a similar decision-making body of a state agency, institution, or authority, or board, commission, committee, agency, authority, or similar decision-making body of any county, township, corporation, municipal corporation, school district, or other political subdivision. So any of our boards and commissions really fall into this public body. So you're a public body. So the next question is, what is a meeting? So a meeting has been determined to be a prearranged discussion of the public business of the public body by a majority of its members. So there are really four parts to that. And number one is a prearranged discussion, and that's of the public business of the public body by a majority of its members. So the question then becomes, I mean, we're having a public meeting here today. It's been advertised. But what about an email that's circulated? So you have to be very careful with those because those may be in violation of the Sunshine Law in the open meetings. So here's a case where in Signal Publishing Company, I listed at the bottom of page 1, that a memorandum circulated to a Board of Education recommending that nothing be done about an asbestos problem and concluding, let me know if you have a different opinion. That constituted a public meeting, and it was in violation of the statute. So you have to be very careful with any emails that are circulated. A lot of times what I say to City Council is that things will go out to you as a board, and commission, your shade tree commission. Things will come out to you by email. The important part of that is that once it comes out to you, that you don't respond, because once you start responding, then you're holding a meeting and it's not in public. You're discussing prearranged business, and all of that has to be in public. So White versus King reiterated prearranged discussion of the public business of the public body in question by a majority of its members. So that's interesting also. What's a majority of the members? I see tonight there are 5 people here, and I'll ask you that question. How many people are on the Shade Tree Commission?
There are 5 voting members and 2 alternates. We are required to have, I think, 3 is our quorum because of that.
So if you had 3 people, 3 members of this commission, and you were discussing the business of the public, the Shade Tree Commission, and you weren't doing it in a meeting, that might be a violation of the Sunshine Law. So you have to be very careful of that.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
So, as you know, projects come before us, and we review them obviously to see if they meet the requirements, the city's requirements for shade tree. What if several of us go out to the site to look at it?
Okay, that was a question you asked, and that's a good question. I thought about that. And that is prearranged, but is it going to be a discussion? You can solve that by not discussing the business of what's going to be on the agenda. You can go there, take a look at it, just not have a discussion. So that could happen.
Okay.
So I would be very careful of that. But you could certainly, you would need to go to the site, not unless it's part of the meeting. The other option is to make it part of the meeting, to leave your meeting open and have a site visit and then come back. So that's another option.
Yeah. So, but if we go and we are, like, we often like counting trees or looking at the species, and we say to one another, I think that's not a sycamore because that's obvious, or I think that's a red maple or something like that. Do you think that would constitute a discussion? Because that doesn't really relate to the, well, it's not directly relating to the requirements of having a certain number of trees per.
True, and I think that would be a good argument that you would make, that it really isn't, again, prearranged. Yes, it would be a prearranged discussion. It's maybe not a discussion of the public business of the public body in question by a majority. Is it a discussion of the public business of the public body, just counting trees? I mean, that's a good question. I think you could make an argument that it isn't if you're just saying, I see so many trees. Now, if you're having a discussion on a specific property that's required to have a certain number of trees, and then after the counting, you start having a discussion over whether or not they have the sufficient number, then you could probably make an argument that that's prearranged discussion of the public business.
But I guess the other option would be to take minutes, or to have minutes of that field trip, and then attach it to the next meeting.
Right, if it's part of your meeting, you could simply state that the meeting's ongoing and have minutes. I think that's the important part also. You do see that it's important that the public knows what's transpiring in a meeting, that they have notice. That was another question that you have. And the public has notice of this meeting tonight through, I believe, the website publishes the notice, and maybe there are other notices that go out that I don't know about. And I could turn that question to you, is how does the public get notified of your meetings?
Well,
That's my question.
Yeah.
What other things like that are required? I mean, would we need to, if we went on this field trip, say, would we need to notify people that we were going to be going?
I think that you would probably, yes. I think you would put that on the agenda.
Yeah, the way we do it at the moment is that I send out the agenda to a list of people, which includes, in particular, the Scott Thompson and the media people here. I have no idea what they do with it after that, because we don't have administrative support by the city.
I believe they posted on the website.
Yeah.
But that's a good question
And
for
I don't,
Scott Thompson as to what happens to that. People obviously know. Do you have another list of people that you send it to?
Yeah, I mean, the list of people I send it to are all the commissioners plus other interested people like the Service Safety Director, the Mayor, some members of Council, Code Enforcement. I send
But members of the public should be notified also, and I do believe that that's probably through.
Yeah, but I have no
the city
access to do that.
Is that written down somewhere in here?
They don't
steps you need to
prescribe
take?
what we have to do, in other words.
All right.
Okay.
Do you have, here's another question then,
But
do
we
you have
do-
your own bylaws?
Yeah. But we do have a set time and date for a meeting.
That's only for the regular meetings. The issue
Right,
really is when we
right.
do these ad hoc meetings
Right.
at sites.
Well, I'll give you an example. Athens City Council, if they're going to have a special meeting, they're required to give 24 hours notice. And they notify the news media. The Clerk of Council, Debbie Walker, sends out a notice. In this case, if you were going to have a special meeting, then there should be public notification in case the public wants to come out and see what's going on there.
So that the city doesn't have any rules for its commissions to follow then when it comes to publishing agendas?
I don't know the answer to that.
Because that
I
would
think
make
a
more
lot of
sense to
them
me.
are, okay, these would be discussions to have. I'm not sure where those are posted.
Yeah,
We could certainly check into that, and I can send you an email back
yeah, that will be.
after I've figured out where those are actually posted.
So if,
We do have some policies, but those are more policies in the way that we work as a commission. We have nothing on the on meetings and that sort of thing. Under Title 33, which is the one that sets up the commission, there's
Right.
nothing like that at all.
No, that's absolutely true. And that's why you are a commission, a public body, and that you do have to follow the Sunshine Law. So I will certainly figure out exactly where your notices are published, and I will email you.
Okay, good.
All right.
What constitutes a meeting if more than one member of the commission gets together?
No,
Or the majority?
no, majority.
A quorum, essentially?
Yes,
Okay.
and that's a meeting.
So if two people went out, I mean, a lot of times people go out individually anyway, and look at a particular
Just make that a
project.
practice.
But,
But if two people went out, that's fine.
yeah, okay.
And they can come back and do what they're supposed to do, is report to the public body their findings. And that may be the easiest and best way to conform with the requirements of the Sunshine Law to do it, just to send two people out to do the investigation. Or if people want to go out individually.
when we were revising the ordinance, doing some wording and improving it a number of years ago, sometimes we would get together and just kind of put an ad hoc meeting. But, obviously we would say, can you come next Wednesday or whatever, and it's somebody's home. But that would constitute a meeting.
Well, ad hoc committees are also public bodies. There's
Yeah,
case
okay.
law on that. So you would have to be very careful of that. That's really why I'm here, is to kind of refresh everyone's
Sure.
recollection about this. There can be other things. There's something called a round robin that could be a violation of the Sunshine Law. That's where one person goes to another or to two people, and they didn't violate the Sunshine Law, or it goes to the other, and then the other one goes to a third with the same bit of information, and that's round robin. And that could be a violation of the Sunshine Law also. And
Does the law ever give any guidance on how to solve these problems?
case law gives you the guidance on how to
Okay.
solve them. For instance, there was a case where people were sitting up at the up at their table, their desk, whatever, and they were passing notes back and forth. And that's not discussing the public business in public. That's doing it privately, and that was found to be a violation. So the Sunshine Law comes from the Ohio Revised Code, and then it's not perfect. It doesn't give you everything. So case law interprets it, and that gives us the guidance on what you can and cannot do, like can't pass notes. It's not a good idea to have emails back and forth. You know, if somebody sends an email, it's best not to respond to it. Somebody may, up here right now, if after this you send an email and nobody responds to you, they're probably remembering my conversation that I had with you about not responding. So, all right, there's certain statutory exemptions that don't really apply to you. City Council can go into executive session. There was one time when Township Board of Zoning Appeals went into an executive session, but it wasn't found to be a violation. On page 3, it tells you the notice requirements. And this is where the special meeting on Section 5, Notice Requirements B, talks about 24 hours written notice. Okay. So what happens if you violate the Sunshine Law? There could be civil liability, and any person who believes that a violation has occurred of the Sunshine Law can file an action in common pleas court. And the open meetings law, Sunshine Law, open meetings law is strictly construed. That means that it's construed against the public body, and a violation could be found. So if there's one violation and there's an injunction against the public body or specific individuals, a second violation could be removal from office. It could be a civil forfeiture. Now, I know you're all not elected officials, but this comes into play with like city council or county commissioners. And, you know, they're especially vigilant of this because it could be, a second violation could be removal from office. There's also could be criminal liability, and that's in the revised code. However, I couldn't find any cases where there had ever been criminal liability. But you all are here to do the business of the public, and just like with public records, whatever business you're conducting, the public has a right to be included in if they should so choose, and that's why you're subject to the open meetings law. Page 4, I listed some of the cases that interpret it, and the first one was the one where they were whispering and passing documents back and forth, and there were some notes, and that was a violation of the Sunshine Law. It doesn't prevent you from being in the same room. Let's say that all of you somehow end up at a social event, and that doesn't mean you're violating the Sunshine Law, just an informal meeting like that. Okay. So you don't have to really worry about that, but it's probably best not to discuss the public business at that social meeting.
Lisa, there's a statement back on page 3 about the special meetings that says you need to give 24 hours advance notice to the news media if they have requested the notification. Is there a routine notice in from the messenger that we tell them?
No, no. Usually what happens, like Debbie Walker, you know, a bigger public body like City Council, Debbie Walker's clerk of council will send out an email notification. So, but let me find out how the public finds out about your meetings, and I'll let David know.
It's repeated in the next line too.
Yes, the 24 hours.
Depending on the news media wanting the news.
Right.
It also says public bodies may have a subscription mailing list that people can subscribe.
Right, if people have requested that, and sometimes members of the public have requested from the clerk of council that they get notification. Okay, so we talked about the Sunshine Law, and I think there was one more question that you had regarding that. Let's see if I can look back at my notes. Well, I know there was the question about meeting at some place outside of your meeting, and then there was one more question.
Well, the one thing I did ask about was what we find this format very difficult.
Oh, right.
because of the fact that we're trying to look at a plan.
Right.
And I think you could challenge some of our meetings occasionally because somebody on that end doesn't know what somebody on this end is actually referring to, because we can't point to the same place on the map. We've got to try
Can you
and
reconvene over at the table to look at things?
Well, what we've done in the past, we brought people up here and so on, but we used to meet in a conference room downstairs, and it was much easier then because you'd have one plan on the table and you could point to it and describe what was going on. This format is particularly difficult, and it was a concern of mine that you know, I think we could be challenged occasionally because, you know, somebody's misinterpreted this.
So that's something I could discuss with Scott Thompson also.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So the first part of the Sunshine Law was the open meetings, and I think I've pretty much explained that to you. And the second part are public records. And I don't think you probably deal with too many public records, although perhaps you do. Items that are presented to you as the maps, those documents, I'm not sure what you do with them, if you attach those to your minutes, perhaps?
We get now most of our documents electronically.
Okay.
And rarely are they then attached to the minutes. Those documents, though, have been provided to us by the Code Office. So I don't know if there's a way through that to do that.
That would be a good idea.
But I mean, they could be attached to the minutes. But again, I've no clue about what we do is periodically. One of the people in the mayor's office or the service safety director's office receives copies of the minutes after we've approved them. We don't do it every meeting. It's done, as I say, on a periodic basis. But those minutes, I mean, I've got the minutes here for our last meeting. There were no plans attached to that meeting, and so there is just this single page. But again, it sort of begs the question, what do you mean by minutes? Because we don't work with printed documents all the time.
All right. Well, let me check into that also for you.
And I don't know why you would have to require us to have printed documents, but maybe there is a legal requirement to have a printed document.
It just depends on how you receive them. If you're receiving them electronically, but then that brings up another issue of retention of your records.
Yes.
And I
It's
don't
on
know.
my computer.
All right. Well, it should be somewhere else also, but let me check on that also. This is good.
Yeah.
And to check on these things.
This over the years, the support, administrative support we've received has changed. When I was first on the commission years ago, we actually had one of the people in the service safety director's office taking our minutes, and she would then record everything. She also deal with the agendas and everything. Once we started using email and more electronic things, the whole lot has devolved onto the chair of the meeting to produce the minutes after the meeting. So, for instance, these minutes were prepared by John here because I wasn't chairing the meeting on that day. And so that's the way it tends to function.
Right. And then where do those minutes go afterwards? Do you send them
Tanya
back to the code
downstairs
office?
receives gets a periodic batch. Usually when she asks me for them, I put them together and send them to her.
Well, we'll try to firm some of this up.
Yeah, well, I think it would be helpful if we could understand what the procedures are that we are expected to follow.
Okay. I'm glad you're asking these questions because you recognize the importance of the public records.
Yeah.
Right.
So we won't get into that too much, but I will tell you that the documents that you're receiving on your, you said computer, is that your private computer?
Yes.
It's not one provided by the city?
No.
Okay. What about your emails, when you email and get things by email?
Typically Gmail is being used by most of us, I think.
All right, so you're using Gmail.
Yep.
Okay. Public records can include emails.
Yes.
Let's say that there's a public records request for your emails. And I don't know if you've ever had a public records
I have.
request before.
Not on this body. Elsewhere, I've had a public
right.
records request.
So things that have to do emails that have to do with city business could be subject to the public records law.
Yes.
And there's been an occasion in the past where a public body of the city was involved in a lawsuit and a person's personal computer was seized. So that was several years ago. But I don't know that that's likely to happen, but as far as any emails that you receive that have to do with the city business, it's probably a good idea to keep those emails rather than delete them.
Mine
in
are all
case
kept.
somebody would request that they want all the emails. Let's say there's a record request for all of your emails dealing with a certain topic dating back a year.
Yep.
Now, you would probably call me and ask me about that, and I would say, I think that may be overly broad. That period of 1 year is a little broad, and let's see if we can ask them to narrow it down a little bit. Or maybe the subject, they want all of your emails from the Shade Tree Commission for the last year. That's definitely overly broad. You could probably talk with the person who's making the request and ask them to narrow that and help you. Along that same vein, although you've never had one, a public records request does not have to be in writing. The person doesn't even have to identify themselves. That's what the law says.
How do we know who to send it to then?
Well, they'll probably give you an email, but they don't have to tell you who it is. And in fact, you can't really ask.
I definitely refer that one to you.
Okay, you can't even ask them for what purpose it is.
Yeah.
But if you would get a public records request, the best thing to do would be to contact me, and I could walk you through the process.
Yeah, and from what I remember before, this was with the university. It was very specific, and yes, the law director there helped make sure that it was well defined. But and the main thing I would say is that all the emails that I receive are backed up and kept on a separate disk, not attached to the computer. So there is a permanent record. But
So that may be something for the rest of the members to consider also.
But
Or you could print them out also. There's no reason you couldn't do that.
I'm not.
I don't know how many you receive.
I'm not printing them all
Okay,
out.
it's just an option.
Yeah.
we often have plans, and I don't think we always have those on email before, like, for development. or
Occasionally,
something.
they're
Right,
yeah.
and they're often quite large, and then later we want to kind of refer to it, but I think there have been occasions where nobody could locate those, and it would really be nice, but this is a storage problem. It will become a storage
Yeah,
problem.
we don't have any facility to store
Right.
papers like that.
And I just made a note about documents that I'm going to check on for you. So,
I think the code enforcement might have them. When we were looking at that place on Charles, he was able to get it.
Yes,
Maybe Ron thought that.
but I
There
I
is no.
think that we looked, I think there was a search made in some cases, and
Now this
I know, there's no set place and there's no set person responsible. and that's
This has
very
been
unfortunate.
a constant issue because when we make a decision, particularly on Title 37 issues, that goes through the code office. But when I've worked with previous code directors, they have not got a systematic approach to retaining the information on those decisions and the maps particularly that go with those decisions.
So we make decisions as a group about what changes a plan should make to make them eligible or to make them in compliance with the ordinance. And then we have no follow-up to see whether they did it or not.
okay, this is good for me to know because, some of the other boards and commissions I've met with had their own issues, individual issues, and these are things that we can deal with. That's why I'm here, to try to help you tighten things up.
Good.
So there have been cases where people, their personal devices, let's say that they got email on their telephone, that a court order said they had to turn over their telephone. Or there was a case that I signed on page 6, Toledo Blake versus the Seneca County Board of County Commissioners, where the county commissioners at their own expense were required to recover emails, which the court included had been improperly deleted. So at their own expense, they had to do that. So it's just something you want to keep in mind, is to keep these rather than delete them. And David's shaking his head.
I'm agreeing. I've got emails going back 20 years.
All right.
I can still read them.
Right. And those can be backed up. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
All right, and the last thing I wanted to talk about was conflicts of interest. And that's on page 7. And you can read this at your leisure. Maybe if you're trying to go to sleep, the whole packet. But a public official has a conflict of interest when his or her ability to be an objective decision maker is impaired by his or her own interests of family members, or interests of business associates. And the influence may arise from approving, voting, deciding, recommending, advising, investigating, or exercising any other substantial administrative discretion. So just keep that in mind. I don't know if that would come up very often, but if something, the way I lead my life is if something has an appearance of impropriety, if someone thinks that I could possibly have a conflict, then I'm the first to say, I'm out of it. I don't even want an appearance of impropriety. I'm sorry, David?
If I recall correctly, the university's conflict of interest tend to have thresholds in them. There's no threshold identified here at all at which that conflict can be considered.
Gifts, there's a basic threshold accepting gifts, and it's really of a substantial nature. That's really the term.
So there's no dollar amount. So.
No, but I don't know if you get gifts,
No,
but
we don't.
for the purpose of
showered with them.
yeah, showered with them. But for the purpose of ethics, our ethics report as elected officials, the threshold's really $75. However, something could still be of substantial value if it were less. Now, if somebody gave you a coffee cup, is that of substantial value? Is that going to exert influence on you? I don't know. We have this discussion in the city all the time because at the holidays, different people bring us in cookies, candy, and does that have a substantial influence on us? Well, we don't turn those away. A food item that's consumable, we don't turn that away. So
we had one instance where somebody said that they noticed that another business was not being held to the same standard as they were. I think they were concerned that we might have given somebody a pass. But then it was explained that they had had their business started way before the law had gone into effect.
Okay.
So, but I mean, that's the kind of thing that could happen.
Well, for instance, let's say somebody from that you do business with, not specifically Shade Tree Commission, but somebody wants to give you a hat that has the logo on it, the business logo. That gives the appearance of an impropriety where it may be under a certain value. I mean, maybe it was $7. However, if somebody sees you in that hat, they're going to think, oh my gosh, they're favoring that business
like
over
or
my
an endorsement.
business. It's an endorsement, but it gives that appearance.
Well, remember when we got those mugs at the Tree City USA? Those water bottles?
Yeah, but
that's a question in and of itself. I mean, if you had the water bottle sitting up here in front of
camera.
you, it certainly would give someone the appearance that you're favoring that company over another one.
Well, it wasn't a company. It's the organisation that runs the Tree City USA.
Right.
So
I don't think that's going to be a problem. And just in looking at the value of it, it's de minimis. So I also attached something interesting from the Ohio Ethics Commission that this was dating back to 2005 on conflicts of interest. And maybe you all have a recollection of this when this had to do with national church residences and who was going to vote and whether or not the people on council had a conflict of interest. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 pages back really pretty much sums it up. A public official is prohibited from taking any action within his or her official capacity or on matters that would result in a definite and direct benefit or would avoid a detriment for any person or entity with whom the official has a close family, economic, business, or fiduciary relationship. So I really think it sums it up. That's that first paragraph there on the fourth page back, page 4. It says Gary Hunter at the top. So that pretty much sums up conflict of interest. So I didn't really plan on speaking long to you. I just wanted to give you a basic overview and find out what you may want from me. And I think I have a pretty good idea of what you may want for me to research. Was there anything else you wanted to discuss? Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I do appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
And what I'll do is get back to David, and then he can bring it back. Instead of sending an email out that might seem like he's inviting a response, maybe at your next meeting he can give you the results of.
I provide information only.
That you can provide information. Just remember, anything going back may be a prearranged
but
discussion.
for example, when we're sent out a reminder, we're having a meeting, we'll typically say, if we can't come, sorry, we're going to be out of town. Or
You're not
whatever,
discussing the business of the
that's
body,
right.
the public body. You're just discussing a ministerial duty.
Right,
So
right.
it's fine.
Yeah,
That's what I thought, but I just.
The issue might arise when I send out one of these plans for people. I may get questions back saying, "Where is this?" or "What is it?" or "How big's this building?" You know, and that's where I think I can see that there could be an issue at that point. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to have to go over here and get mine.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you for that
Thank you.
presentation, and I look forward to getting the answers to some of our questions. We have no Title 33 or Title 37 issues. I have a report that I'm going to read from Ron Lucas, who is not able to be with us again today. He wants to work with us on a replacement tree for a tree plan for West State Street Fields near the Dalton Field. AEP need to replace some facilities of theirs, and this will involve taking out some pine trees, and so we need to figure out what we want to put back in place of those. I think this has appeared before us a couple of years ago, and there are some fairly mature white pines, if I remember rightly, that are in the way of this project. And the question is going to be, do we want to replace them with evergreens? Do we want to replace them with deciduous trees, I think?
I think they should go around them. That's what I think.
Yep, but...
You should what? Go around them?
Yeah, but
they're
not. They're gonna
the thing is that if that is a field where if people are, if it's going to, it's good to have shade.
Yes.
And pine trees aren't the best trees for producing shade. They have a value, certainly, but in terms of...
They're actually producing quite a bit of shade there.
Shade, yes.
I know, but compared to a deciduous tree, which is more of an umbrella.
Well, you just have one, but if you have several,
Right, where
create a little atmosphere
those
of
trees are pyramidal and just you're not getting as much shade for your, but they do have value in that they're green in the winter, and they're.
Yeah, and in fact these ones do produce a lot of shade where they are. It's very dense actually underneath them.
Are those trees that are along the parking lot there in the outfield at Dalton Field? Do you know?
Yes, it's Dalton Field. Yeah.
I
don't know exactly where it is.
Okay. Well, the only another perspective might be, were they put in there to be a windscreen of some sort? And that might drive whether we should go away from pine trees or not.
Right.
That's why I was wondering if it's up there by the parking lot. Well, there's some value in getting some shade trees there.
I
for the
think
parking
it's
lot.
close
but it was
to the
in,
parking lot.
It was
Yes.
in the outfield, and I didn't know if that was for some kind of wind, because the wind would be coming toward the field there. Maybe they wanted to break the wind, or I don't know. But
If I remember right,
Well, supposedly that's one of the positives about trees. They do help in the winter too, in terms of.
I think the location they're at is just off West State Street, where the parking lot is.
Yeah.
And AEP are going to redirect the cables through that area, and that's why these trees have to go. And as I say,
Well, I'm going to go out and take a look,
Yeah.
see what I can find there. I think
Well,
that's
let's don't
what it is.
all go together, but
No.
We can all go together.
I'm going to ride my
We can
bike.
have a buddy system.
yeah.
Just check it out. Okay.
Okay.
Anything else from Ron?
Yes. Arbor Day will be in October or September. That's what I think we discussed last time, or previously anyway. And he's planning to plant a chestnut or two in a public place with the Athens AM Rotary and have school children involved. So that's all.
Did you
good.
say in September?
September or October?
Okay.
No date yet for it. But we'd already agreed we were going to move it from the official Arbor Day date in the spring to our own Arbor Day in the fall, which we're allowed to do. There are tree removals on South May, Mulligan Road, North Congress and Tulane. These are being classified as emergency removals, but I don't have any more information than what he's just written down here. So if you hear of trees being taken in those areas, it's probably because they've been authorised by the city. America in Bloom Tour will take place from July 25th to July 27th. So those of you out there with particular gardens, if you can spruce them up for the 25th to the 27th, we would appreciate it.
he didn't say anything in response to
He had,
what John had
yeah,
said.
he had indicated to me when I emailed him, and I think it's noted in the
Did he
minutes,
what?
that he had indicated to me that he would be at this meeting and that he would look into whether there were some resources where we might be able to do some kind of a tree brochure.
Good.
So, but he was going to come to this meeting,
But he's not
so
here.
he's not here, and he didn't put it in his report. But we need to kind of push back a little bit until.
Reminds me, I would like to get something together, particularly to address pruning of trees and the crown lifting that needs to be done, because I can see the trees in front of Staples and Lowe's are going to get to that stage fairly soon where somebody's going to say, we need to prune these. Well, I want to get something in the hands of the people there to
Yes, well,
suggest how they should better maintain them.
yeah, I have discussed pruning with the people at Staples and with the pruner who is hired to do that, and he likes to prune them sort of like the
Yes.
round rose bush.
Nice
That's
little ball,
his,
yes.
right, and but because a couple of people from the tree commission, this was a number of years ago, spoke to him about it, he did stop after he'd done a couple of rows, and but I don't.
But I think if we could come up with just a one-page
Yes.
sheet
I'll take that.
on how to prune in order to raise these trees up to the point where they're not going to be in anyone's way, but where they're going to begin to give adequate shade to the parking lot, which is, after all, the purpose of putting the trees there, as far as we're concerned. People like shade in their parking
So
lots.
have you got a place to look? I mean,
Look for what?
for this one page,
Nope.
how to.
Feel free to be the author.
I mean, we get a bunch of stuff from Google, I suppose that's another.
Well, and Anne has resources, and there are resources online. In fact, you probably have it from that course you took about pruning.
Yeah, look there.
Yeah. Okay, so we need to remind Ron that he owes us an answer on the resources for a brochure. Are there any other questions you want me to get back to Ron with?
Well, I have a couple of things. One is a suggestion, maybe for Arbor Day. But at the middle school, I noticed that there were some trees that had to be removed. Whether they were ash trees, I don't know. But it might be nice to have another tree at the middle school.
Okay.
As you face the middle school on the right,
Yep.
there was a tree
Yeah,
there.
those were ash trees that were removed. Yeah.
And the other thing is, when I was on West Union the other day, admiring the benches and the what looked like maybe granite, near where the trees are planted, and then I was looking down the street, and I guess they're red maples, beautiful. The fruits are quite red and very attractive. And then I thought, well, what are these other trees? Well, they're ginkgos. And again, ginkgos are not the best for shade trees, by and large. I mean, you're getting more shade for your tree, for the amount you put on the amount of cost and effort so, you know, I'm very fond of ginkgos, but that is an area that really needs shade.
So you're suggesting we should plant some additional shade trees
Oh,
there?
well, what I'm suggesting is maybe before plantings like that are done.
No. I think we need to address that particular area, and it sounds
Okay,
like we
all
should
right.
be adding
Okay,
trees.
we should be adding trees,
Yeah.
but I was thinking of the future when trees are planted, that the city has the resource of the tree commission, and if they would come and say, we're going to do these plantings, and do you have any recommendations that at that time?
Similarly, when they're going to cut them down.
Yes, and to know when, to know why trees are being
I'll
cut
let you into
down.
a secret. I sent an email to the mayor, the service safety director,
Yeah.
and to Ron exactly on this issue.
Yes.
As chair of the tree commission about a week or so ago,
Oh,
because
did you? Good. Did you keep a copy of it?
I have a copy. I'm sure they have copies of it too. The two projects I spoke about were the swimming pool and the work along East State Street. The swimming pool parking lot has lost a series of trees that were providing good shade, and there won't be shade there for many years now. I will probably never be able to park in that parking lot in shade.
Right.
You know, it's going to be 30 years probably before we have the shade back that those trees were
It
producing.
looks like a desert over there now.
Yeah.
Yes.
On East State Street, it was more landscaping than actually shade trees, but it was put there as a barrier, green barrier, between the street and the parking lot near the visitor centre. And that landscape was torn out.
And they're putting those sidewalks in.
And they're putting the sidewalks in. I mean, I'm all in favour of sidewalks, but I didn't see why the landscaping had to be torn out. They could have taken the sidewalk through the parking lot. We should lose some spaces, I suppose, at that point, wouldn't you?
Well, yes, and I noticed that a number of the crabapple trees, some of those were lost.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
the street's looking really bare.
Yep, and it never really recovered from the last widening project. In the sense that we did have some trees planted, but as you just noted, those trees are now being torn out again. Because
But the good news, David, is that they weren't big shade trees that we lost. These were small trees with a shorter lifespan.
that I guess is the good news. Yes.
Well,
But the widening did take out shade trees that
Yes.
were there, bigger shade trees,
Yes.
you know, and then we've never, so that was done, what, 10 years ago, 10 years ago, somewhere around there. And we had trees planted, and now they're taken out again, and, you know, so we're not gaining any ground.
But I think it's one of the reasons that shade trees in the city, city trees, have this shorter lifespan. It's not that they can't live longer, but things happen.
No, but what we should be doing, and I've invited myself to the Sustainability Commission for this purpose. I want the Sustainability Commission to take on this issue with us.
Good idea.
That trees need 30 to 100 years to really establish themselves. We need to be planning around that time scale and not in this 10 to 20 year time scale. I've got a little cartoon that I love to refer to that I forget where it came from, but it shows a big box store closing down and two little kids standing outside the box store saying to each other, "Oh, does this mean we get our trees back?" Yes, because box stores do not last as long as trees. And we need to be planning around this.
what did you give them some sort of time frame to get back to you, or
Who?
the people you sent the email to?
No, I just put them on notice that according to Title 33, we are supposed to be consulted,
Okay.
and we're not. And I asked that in future we are consulted. It's exactly the piece that Lee was saying.
Do you think that there's a channel that it would, I mean, do we need to maybe work at it a little bit to get it to happen?
They think they know enough about what trees should be planted, and they don't need any information from us.
Yeah.
But I mean, is there something, some barriers that you think might be, besides their?
Changing the culture. That's all it's going to take. But if you've got a culture that doesn't, I mean, my point particularly to them was that under Title 37, architects and engineers have to come to us and show us their plans, and we discuss with them, you know, can you do this to save these trees? That is not the culture of the city. The city engineer, works people do not come to us and say, this is what we plan to do, and then have us say, well, can you save that tree over there if you do this? That just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And if nothing else, as I think I pointed out before, people will come to us and ask about trees.
Yes.
And if we do not have the rationale, then, you know, it doesn't, the optics aren't good for that. So.
Certainly not.
Well, I'm really grateful that you did that. That's great.
I
Because I
think
think we all feel like we've been pretty much sidelined.
Well, I think it's also with private projects too, because I think the code enforcement office is making decisions. They believe they understand the title documents, and they'll make decisions and not necessarily bring a project to us. I mean, there's been a number of projects in the last several months, or certainly the last 6 months, where they've actually gone ahead and give the developer the go-ahead without bringing it to us, because they essentially say it meets the requirements of the regulations, and so it does not require action by the commission. But I think there are things that are falling through gaps with that too. I mean, and I think that just plays into the culture where they're not necessarily, you know, they're trying to streamline or whatever and move things more quickly through the system. And I think then that causes errors to be made, I think, at times.
And we aren't necessary.
I had some concerns
Well,
about
maybe,
the
I don't
lack
know. Yeah.
of connecting between us and
Yeah,
follow-up with the people that we...
Right, and that's another thing, the follow-through on the part of the
And
city
the
as
letter that
well.
I put together was not, you know, the end
Yeah,
all. I would
right.
like us to...
Right, anyway.
Really,
okay.
I'd hoped that we could talk about it some and see what kind of process we wanted to use. But he just deep-sixed it somewhere. I don't know where it is. I've asked him about it, and he said, oh, yeah, I got to get back to that. So I don't know whether just to leave it or whether, well, I'm not going to leave it. But.
Good. Keep on raising it. That's fine. Okay, so that's the list for Ron. I don't have anything to report under maintenance of the tree canopy. Is there any other business that we need to attend to?
Well, if Ron were here, I would ask him why there are trees that are marked with blue, I think, on Old Peach Ridge. There are several trees, and they're dead, and I just don't...
They're marked with blue?
I think they're marked with blue, and
I
they
think
look...
that means something with it.
I think it does, too. And I think they're within the right-of-way. I'm guessing that they might be within the right-of-way because it's within, 20 feet of the center.
I'll refer that one to him.
Yeah, so, anyway, because it looks like it could be a safety issue because these are dead trees.
Yeah.
They're sort of leaning towards the street. And
Do you think is there any kind of ruling about how close people can plant to the street? I mean, not just trees, but shrubs and stuff like that.
There are no longer restrictions on how close you can park to the street as long as you don't obstruct the sight lines at intersections.
At intersections.
Yeah,
the only place.
intersections are the usual.
Well, when I back out of my yard, the people next door have these lovely shrubs that I love, and I'm so glad they planted them. But I can't see. I was hoping they weren't going to get in trouble for it. But.
Well, certainly at public intersections, the police will come along and say this has to change.
Yeah.
I don't know about private driveways and so on. I don't know what the rules are.
I'm fine with it because I can just veer around and find it.
The last item I would have for Ron is, if this time for the meeting doesn't work, let's find something that does. Because I don't think Ron has been to a meeting in the last 6 months or so.
Okay.
I mean,
Well, I
know,
am going to look back over the records of these meetings and try and figure out, because we've lost David
He was here.
Simcoff,
He was here last.
yeah.
and because he can't make this time,
Oh.
this is the only time really during the day when I can actually meet.
Okay, well,
and so we'd have to go back to an evening meeting.
Well,
We've had better attendance, I feel, at the evening meetings than we've had at the
right, that's what I feel
But
too.
I want to get the data first.
And I just would like to, I mean, I just think, you know, as we talk about the fact that we're maybe not being consulted, at least when they're here, you can at least talk to them, you know, and otherwise you've got to go set up a meeting with them or try to, you know, get on their agenda to make it, to have discussions.
Yeah, and if three of us go and meet with them, that's
well,
a,
we got to have minutes and everything else with that, right?
And now, is it even, can we even email them and pose questions, you know, about, I don't know if it becomes.
Well,
you've got to be careful, because
Yeah.
if it concerns either public trees, particular public trees, or it refers to a landscape plan, then that's information for the meeting, and that's what Lisa was saying. We need to be very careful about.
Well, so that's what I, you know, like we want to. If I want clarification on something, then that becomes.
Yes, we've then got a big issue, because if we can't do it by email, we've got a major problem.
I didn't quite understand when she said if it has the need of a response.
Well, for instance, if we ask a question about a tree, I mean, we've had trees mentioned in Ron's report on South May. I mean, if one of us was to email him and say exactly, well, which trees and what do you think is wrong with them, and then we go out and look at it, and then we go back to Ron and say, well, this is what we've found. We've now got an email chain going on where a decision is being influenced, and I think that was what she was referring to. That we need to be very careful when that's being done, because we then have to bring all that up at a meeting and make it clear how the decision was arrived at.
And you know, when meetings only take place once a month, and sometimes when not everybody can make it every month, then really makes it difficult to act.
Yep. Okay, we need to, I think, bring this meeting to a conclusion. Can I ask you to look over the minutes and see if there are any corrections to it? If I wasn't there, I can't really comment on the corrections of it to it.
Make a motion to.
Thank you, Nancy. Can I have a second?
Well, Emily, you were here, and
is that
I was not here. So
I wrote them, so I shouldn't probably second it, I don't think. I don't know if there's a conflict of interest there or not.
So it's really only Emily and Nancy who are eligible to approve and second.
Okay.
Well,
You going to second them?
I will second.
Thank you. Are any objections to approving the minutes of the last meeting? Hearing none, we have minutes for the last meeting. Our next meeting is due to be on July 11th at 4 p.m. again in the City Council chamber. And with that, we are adjourned.
Okay, thank you.